Hey everyone, welcome to Southridge. We're so glad that you're experiencing this online service together with us today. A special welcome to those of you who are checking us out for the very first time. We hope that you'll not just watch the screen, but that you'll enter in and immerse yourself in this experience along with us. A few tips to help you do that. Of course, turn the volume up so that you can fully participate and sing with all you've got. Allow yourself to be led throughout the service experience as you're led. And for those of us who are musicians, remember that there are chord charts below that you can access, as well as transcripts for those of us for whom English isn't our first language or we have hearing challenges. You can find those as links in the below the video player. We're excited to launch into a brand new series today, kind of an annual tradition around here that we call It Takes a Village. And we do this because we believe as a church community that it takes a village to raise a family. That's why we're a church community together. But more than that, we also believe it takes a village to raise us as a spiritual family. And I say that at the front end of the service for a couple reasons today. First off is that we're excited for this entire It Takes a Village series in 2020 to hear from outside voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color so that they can help us understand issues of racism, of privilege, and even of white privilege to a greater degree. And we're thrilled to gain that awareness and to learn and grow together as a church family. More than that, though, I want to give the heads up that these aren't just talks that we're going to introduce. This It Takes a Village series is going to be an entire immersive experience in each of these mornings. And so the service order is going to feel a little bit different today. But I hope that you'll be a full participant and not just a spectator of this, so that personally and together as a church family, we can get the most of what God has for us. So at this time, I'm going to hand things over to our action pastor, Nate Dirks, who's going to kind of set the tone for what this morning's going to look like. But we're glad you're here as we begin the adventure of It Takes a Village together. Welcome to Southridge, everyone. We're glad you're here.
In the book of Proverbs, it says, "Listen to advice and accept instruction, that you may gain wisdom in the future." Among the various lessons that are emerging in the wake of George Floyd's death last month and subsequent Black Lives Matter demonstrations around the world, including in our community here in Niagara, one thing that's clear is how much those of us who are not Black, Indigenous, or people of color need to learn to hear the voices of our neighbors who are. Today is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're going to be hearing from a few voices who are either Indigenous people or are white people learning what it means to be allies with our Indigenous neighbors. I'd like to introduce you to our friend Janessa Gallenkamp from our St. Catharines location, who along with her husband Dan is helping us as a church community to start learning about how to place things in the correct perspective as we approach this conversation.
Hello, Tanshi. My name is Janessa Gallenkamp, and I am a citizen of the Métis Nation of Ontario. I'm going to lead you through a spiritual acknowledgement of the land upon which we are sitting right now. When we talk about the land and its original people, we acknowledge that we are meeting on Indigenous land that has been inhabited by the first people who were placed here by the Creator. Long before today, Indigenous peoples have been the stewards of this land, known by many as Turtle Island. We're grateful for the opportunity to live in community here, and are thankful for the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We acknowledge and honor that the land we're on in Niagara is the land of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We honor their history. We honor those who are gone and those who are still here. We honor their presence and resilience. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaty No. 3, and is protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Treaty, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region, extending all the way up to the Ottawa Valley. This was a treaty that predates colonial contact, and it was made between the Haudenosaunee and their allies, including the Anishinaabe. The Dish has 3 simple teachings. First, never take more than your share. Second, make sure there's enough food for everybody. And thirdly, don't foul or take the dish. We also honor the land itself. She was here long before us. The trees remember the songs and stories of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, and all others who passed through these lands over the years. The berry bushes remember being tended to with care, with the people and animals taking only what they needed. I often think about these things when I'm standing in my own garden, or when I see the mighty maple in our front yard swaying in the breeze. It's important for me to remember the land and my connection to it. It reminds me where I come from, and it tells me the stories of my ancestors. I'm from a place called Tiny, Ontario, but my ancestors are originally from Drummond Island. They were the sons and daughters of Cree women and voyageurs who worked for the Northwest and Hudson's Bay companies. These children created a culture all their own, one filled with singing, fiddling, dancing, and color, the culture of the Métis voyageurs. Following the War of 1812, my ancestors were forced to move from the land that they lived on. They migrated to Penetangmachine and the surrounding area, where my mother's family is from, and where I was born. My father was born here in Niagara. His family lived in a big house. You may know it as the John Brown House, and part of the land that they farmed would later become Short Hills Provincial Park. We must acknowledge the pain that the coming of the settlers, or second people, has caused, both to the land and to Indigenous peoples. Residential schools, loss of languages, removal from traditional lands, broken treaties, reservations, the ongoing tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across our country, the opposition to the Six Nations' right to hunt. These are just some of the ways that the relationship between settlers, the land, and Indigenous peoples has been broken. Acknowledging the land and the Indigenous peoples who continue to call it home is one tiny step towards righting the relationship that has been broken and continues to be harmed by colonization. I am Métis. However, through my father, I am also of settler descent. As settlers, we need to reflect on our responsibilities as we frequent institutions like work, school, or church, institutions built on Indigenous land. Growing up in Niagara, I never heard the traditional names of the land and agreements. Indigenous peoples were talked about in past tense, and the struggles they face were placed in the past as well. It's easier to deny Indigenous peoples their rights if we act like their struggles don't exist anymore. As settlers, and as the church, we must make the promises and challenges of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. We also need to recognize that this good land is the Creator's land, not ours. It's a gift. It was never meant to be bought and sold, but to be enjoyed and appreciated by all. When you take care of the land and are in good relationship with it, it takes care of you in return. As the Bible says, what you sow, you will also reap. We must be people willing to learn and take part in the healing and reconciliation of this land. As a beginning step, right now I'm going to lead you through a spiritual practice of personally acknowledging the land that you happen to be on. So wherever you are, whether in a house, apartment, on a back deck, or wherever, I invite you to join me now. If you are sitting on a chair or a couch, I'm going to ask you to stretch out of your comfort zone for a moment. Move out of your seat and take a seat on the ground instead. Allow yourself to come into a posture and spirit of humility as you do. You are intentionally moving yourself closer to the earth upon which your life takes place. As you breathe in and out, think about the trees that produce the oxygen that you breathe, the nutrients in the soil that grow those trees strong and healthy, the sunshine and the rain that feed them continually, and the Creator who fuels the whole system. Place your hand on the ground beside you. If you're outdoors, your hand might be on or very close to the actual ground. If you're indoors, I want you to close your eyes and picture the land beneath the constructed space that you're in. Can you see it? Feel it breathing and holding you up. Beyond treaties and land deeds and rental agreements and mortgages, the earth is ultimately always and only a gift from the Creator. Right now, we pause to acknowledge it and receive it as such. As you press your hand into the floor or ground beside you, speak a quiet thank you, first to the Creator. Thank you. And now, to all of the people who cared for this land before you came into your current moment upon it, let it come genuinely from your heart. Thank you. Amen. The next time you're outside, I encourage you to revisit this practice with your hand placed on the real ground. And maybe every time you're outside, make a habit of acknowledging the land. Give thanks when you watch the sun rise and set over Niagara Falls. Think of the Creator when you hear the wind rustle through the tree leaves at Short Hills Park. As we worship together now, remember that this land and its people are a gift, meant to be loved and cherished. In return, you'll find that they will give back to you out of love, just as our Creator designed them to.
This is my Father's word, and to my listening ears, all nature sings, and around me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas. His hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is a ruler yet. This is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let the heavens ring. God reigns, let the earth be glad. God reigns, let the earth be glad.
As we continue together this morning, we're going to be hearing from a longtime friend of our Southridge community. Darcy Belanger is a leader in our community in Niagara, having been a part of the Compassionate City Initiative alongside Mayor Walter Senzik. He's been the director of the Niagara Regional Native Friendship Center and has been educating people around Niagara about our local Indigenous community in a variety of contexts. Darcy's here to share with us about some of the impact that the world-changing events of the past few months have been having on our local Indigenous neighbors.
I am an Anishinaabe from Black River, Manitoba. That is my home community. I am a child of the 60 Scoop. What the 60 Scoop is I was essentially taken from my family and my community and adopted out to a non-Indigenous family thousands of miles away. It's like most adoptees, the trauma from that has really affected us when we reach our adolescence age. So a lot of us will go in and out of the justice system and pick up addictions. And essentially live in poverty for our life, for most of our lives, and it's very hard to to really break away from that lifestyle of survival. Being as an adoptee, I was out on my own since age 14. So at age 14, the way to survive, I lived on the streets. I have a couple very close friends of mine that we used to do our crimes together. My friends were non-Indigenous, and if we got caught, there were multiple times we would get caught. They would get 3 months imprisonment, and I would get 9 months, and I just never knew why. Now I'm older and I'm starting to really understand what was happening back then, and what it was is, for me being Indigenous, I would always get more time. Essentially, when COVID-19 came in and we were put on kind of lockdown, quarantine, the way you ever want to call it. But if you actually go through the symptoms of what the government was asking us to do, it's actually similar symptoms to depression from isolating yourself. And now if you have trauma from childhood, and that's the one thing that is the worst thing to do, is really to isolate yourself. It was the second week to third week in, that's when a lot of us really started to kind of self-sabotage, isolate, looking at other ways how to cope. Now within our adopted community members, addictions is the way that they know how to cope. So in a lot of cases, addictions went on the rise. Even personally myself, I really isolated myself. My contract was still going on. I worked for the city of Niagara Falls as their Indigenous programs coordinator, and it really affected me too. I isolated myself and just kind of shut the world out. And it took about almost 3 weeks for some close friends that really kept reaching out. If that has affected me like how it did, the ones that don't understand their traumas, it becomes more severe. And that's where the hard work on really trying to get them out to talk, but in a safe way, since we have to do social distancing, and trying to get them out of the house. Sometimes they don't have their cell phones. They may not be able to pay the bill. So that means to go knocking on doors. And over the time, we've lost a couple due to suicide. So it started, for a group of us, it started to become a strong reality as we need to get out there to really start reaching out to them, and just to make sure that they're okay, and to let them know that they're not going through this alone. As a role with the church on working together, building that bridges and walking towards healing together, what we can do is simple as going onto the computer, Googling the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And what you're going to find out on there is 94 recommendations that was done by the Indigenous community from many different nations right across Canada. And these are recommendations for municipalities, provinces, provincial and federal government to really kind of help implement. Now, here in St. Catharines, Walter Sensick has done a lot of amazing work, but there's reaching out to the local powwow that happens in Montebello Park here in St. Catharines, or you could go on the niagarafalls.ca website, where every Thursday night they have Indigenous webinars going on, or even get connected to the Niagara Regional Native Center and their events page, and you'll hear about webinars going on and learning more about the Indigenous community that's right here in Niagara. But we need to talk to the government, voice our opinions to our local politicians, to really start bringing healing centers to help heal our community members. It's going to take generations. We're not going to fix it this generation. It's going to take multiple generations. But what we can do as a community is start building that foundation to healing.
As we hear Janessa and Darcy share with us, for those of us not from an Indigenous background, it can be a challenge to even know what our posture should be in this conversation. Our friend Derek Parento is from the Mennonite Brethren's Multiply program. He spent years serving on the streets in Toronto, responding to the prevalent human trafficking industry, which, in part because of the high numbers of Indigenous women who are victims of human trafficking, then segued into walking alongside a number of Indigenous communities in Ontario. Derek is joining us to help us to understand how we can appropriately and meaningfully respond to our Indigenous neighbors, both today and moving forward.
Good morning, Southridge. My name is Derek Parento. I'm a pastor with the Mennonite Brethren. I've had the privilege for the last 9 years to be able to journey with First Nations people and First Nations communities in the Georgian Bay area. I'm a settler. I'm not an Indigenous person. And I've had this incredible opportunity to be invited in to community and into relationship, to have the opportunity to learn. I'd like to share with you some of what I've learned. There's been so many things. But the lesson that I've learned the most frequently, and the one that so far has seemed the most important, is the lesson of deep listening. Often I find myself trying to be busy, trying to fix things, trying to figure things out. And over again, the elders in the communities that I'm friends with will encourage me to slow down and to listen. And not just listen with my ears, but listen deeply with my heart. This is much like what Jesus would say to us. You know, over and over again in the Gospels, he said, "Those with ears to hear, listen." It was important to Jesus. He seemed to distinguish between listening and deep listening. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, after such incredible teaching on loving, on forgiving, on not judging, on praying, on being generous, Jesus chose to finish that sermon in Matthew 7 with the parable of the two houses. In that parable, Jesus said there's two groups of people here who've just listened to my message. There's those who've listened and will go away and not put it into practice. And they're like the people who've built a house on sand. And there's people here who have heard and will go and obey. They'll change, they'll act differently. And those folks are like those who have built their house upon a rock. And when the floods come and the storms come, that house will stand and the other will be washed away. Jesus said it was really, really important to listen with a particular posture and a particular openness that would lead to change. Now, Jesus wouldn't have talked about this if it just was going to come naturally. I believe, and I've learned, that it's something I need to ask for and something I need to press into. I'm just going to encourage you to join with me now. And we're going to ask God to give us ears to hear. With all that's happening in the world right now, not only in America, but also here in Canada and across many parts of the world, there's Indigenous voices and voices from people of color who are crying out for change, for justice. We can hear it, but that doesn't mean we're really hearing it. We need to ask for help. We need to open our ears to our neighbors. We need to open our ears to God so that we can be different, act differently. So please join me as I pray, and let's take a moment of silence just to symbolize our faith in what we're asking for, that we will receive ears to hear. We're going to do this now, but I'm also going to encourage you this week, take a moment to just sit in silence each day as you start your day, as a reminder of what you have asked for ears to really, truly hear. Heavenly Father, please open our ears. Please open our hearts. Help us to hear our neighbors. Help us to hear your voice. Help us to build our life on the rock, not the sand. We sit before you now in silence and in faith. Thank you, Southridge. Thank you for sitting in silence with me. I'll be doing this all week long on my own, and I just trust and pray that you also will be doing it in your own homes, in your own ways, as we wait with expectation for God to actually change us so that we can actually hear our neighbor and be different in this world. Bless you.
Every day we go to war again, and we assume we know so much more than them before we hear what they have to say. The headline breaks and we start to hate again, calling them names again. We give our peace away. Well, I hope they see it, 'cause I wanna see it. I hope we believe it. I wanna see the love all around you, all around you. I wanna know that love is all around you. It's all around. Day by day, hope fades away, and then we know that there's pain within we cannot medicate. So learn to feel, learn to begin again, open our eyes again to see our brother's pain. Well, I hope they see it, 'cause I wanna see it. I hope we believe it, 'cause I wanna see the love all around you, all around you. I wanna know the love is all around you. It's all around. See how it lights you up, lights you up. See how it lights you up, lights you up. See how it lights you up, it lights you up. I wanna see the love all around you, all around. I wanna know the love is all around you, all around you. Ooh, yeah. one with the Father, one with the Spirit, one with the Son of God, one with our sister, one with our brother, one family by the blood. Make us one. Make us one. You will be done. Make us one. One heart.
One heart with heaven, one mind connected, one body unified. Bind us together, now and forever. Jesus be glorified.
Make us one. Make us one. You will be done. Make us one. We confess all our offenses. We confess we've been afraid. We repent of all our pride. Let all the hurt be washed away. For all the wars and violence against our enemy, come heal our land with your great river. Restore our family and make us one. Make us one. You will be done. Make us one. Make us one. Make us one. Make us one. And let your kingdom come. Make us one. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you for joining in with us this morning, for singing and praying, for listening and engaging with the Spirit that cries out for God to make us one. We're so glad you've joined us as we honor and celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, there's another celebration also happening today, and we just want to take a moment to acknowledge Father's Day. We know that for some, this is a day that can bring many mixed feelings, especially if you've lost your dad, or missing your dad, if you haven't had a great relationship with your dad, or if you're wanting to become a dad and that hasn't happened yet. We love you and we see you, and we hope that you can find comfort in our Heavenly Father today. But for those fathers and father figures in our community who are celebrating, we want to say a special Happy Father's Day to you. We're so thankful for all that you do in your own families and for all that you do in our Southridge family. We hope that you feel loved and appreciated and honored today, even though we can't celebrate you together as a community. But just because we are apart, it doesn't mean that we're missing out on some of the best things about being a community. There are still opportunities to connect, still opportunities to serve, and there is still an opportunity to help support each other by pooling our financial resources together. If you're able to give today, we're so thankful for that generosity. You can find a place to give by credit card below, as well as a link to other options such as automatic withdrawal and e-transfer. If you're joining us for the first time today, an extra special welcome to you. We hope that you'll feel encouraged and as if you're among friends. As our way of saying thanks for joining us, we'd love to send you a no-strings-attached gift of our Artisan Southridge Jam. If you scroll down below this video player on our online service page, you'll see a section specifically for newcomers. If you're comfortable sharing some basic info with us, we'd love to get that gift sent off to you. It's just a little expression of our gratitude and welcome. Now, as we transition into a very special message this morning, Nate's going to tell us a bit more about our guest speaker.
Continuing to listen and hopefully actually hear this morning what God is wanting to reveal to us about where He wants us to be in relation to our Indigenous neighbors, we're incredibly fortunate to be able to hear from Cheryl Bear. Cheryl from Nadle-Wuten First Nation is a prolific educator across North America, a professor at Regent College in BC, and an award-winning singer-songwriter, among other things. Let's have a welcoming and open posture to what Cheryl will be sharing with us this morning.
Hari Suanda, Cheryl Bear Slee, Nadle-Weten, Damdenu Slee. My name is Cheryl Bear, and I'm from the beautiful village of Nadle-Weten, and I am so grateful to be here with you, Southridge Community Church. Thank you for the kind invitation, Pastor Mike. And we're here to talk today about racism in Canada. This is a big topic, and I'm really grateful to be called upon to discuss this with you today and to share some of my thoughts about it. There's usually, as I was talking with Pastor Mike, the usual response to the topic of racism in Canada is often, what does that have to do with us? We're not racist. We're fine. And so I am grateful that you guys are tackling this and trying to dig a little bit deeper. So I mentioned where I'm from. My Indigenous community is Nadle-Weten. It's located in central British Columbia. We used to be called the Carrier Nation, and that's because the French fur traders said we were really good at carrying heavy loads for long distances. And I think that they were prophetic. I think our people definitely have carried heavy loads for a long time. I'd like to also acknowledge that the place that I'm at, the land that I'm on, is the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. And I'd like to thank them for letting us do our business here on their land. The land acknowledgement is an important first step in the journey of reconciliation. And sometimes I call it like a baby's first step, because it just to exemplify how long this journey is going to be, and that it's going to take most of our lives to be on it. But it's an important step. And that is because it makes everything real. I remember being in grade 6 that's when you do Indigenous content in schools, and of course I'm 51 now, so back in the day my teacher said, this term we're going to study Indians in Canada, and I was one of 2 Native students in the class, and I was excited. I thought, oh hey, this is about us. We kind of looked at each other and we were like, that's cool. But then within seconds, the teacher said, studying Indians in Canada, and then, we're going to study the Hurons in Eastern Canada. And I was kind of bewildered, like, I'd never heard of them. But he answered right away. He said, but we think they're probably extinct. And I've since met a few, and actually Wendake is beautiful, and troubling that those words were said. But I remember kind of feeling like, and looking back on that experience now, I kind of felt like I was just sort of rendered invisible. And that's the art of former Canadian curriculum in Canada. And it was to take your eyes off the land that is right in front of you, to take your mind off of that, and just make Indigenous people something somewhere far, far away and probably not existent anymore. And that way it's much, much easier to objectify and to take. And so the story that's been written about Indigenous people in Canada is one that is mostly derogatory. If you go back and look at news articles over the years, centuries, and the early writings of the explorers and so on, you'll find a lot of derogatory statements. And basically we're talked about as if we're dumb or scary. And so when you think about that and you think, oh, these Native people are so simple, they don't even use the land, and so we can just take it. Or if we're scary, oh, they're savages and they're warlike and evil and all of those things, then it's much more easy to go, well, they don't deserve the land. So those are two of the ways that we've been written about. We're continue to be written about today. And some of those misconceptions, we kind of think as people in the church, we kind of think, oh, but at least that's out there, that's politics, and that has nothing to do with inside the church. But I grew up I've been a Christian since I was 8 years old, and I've experienced a lot of racism in the church over the years. But it's disguised. It's disguised as spirituality or proper doctrine. And so one of the questions that I got when I was a teenager, somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, you're Native." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm Native." And I said, "I'm from Notley." And I've always been very proud of being from Notley. I never denied where I was from, even though I knew that as soon as I said where I'm from, that the person's countenance would change. Their brow would furrow and they would get very pensive. And this happened in this situation as well. And this person said, "Oh, there's a lot of darkness in your community, isn't there?" And I was like a teenager, like, how do I respond to that? This person is an adult, and this person is supposed to know, more about God than me. So I guess our land is more dark, is my conclusion. And then, like today, I wish I could go back in time and just answer that question. There's a lot of darkness in your community, right? And I wish I could say yes, at night. And the next question that I got was, I was wearing some Native earrings, some beaded earrings. They were beautiful, and somebody noticed, "Hey, those are Native earrings." And I was like, "Yes, hey, I'm a teenage girl, right? Of course I'm going to be happy somebody notices." But then the person said, "Oh, don't those have evil spirits?" And immediately, then again, and both of these comments, they put something onto me, that my land is dark and that my earrings are demonic. It put something on me as a Native person that there must be something wrong with me, wrong with my people, and wrong with my land in order for these comments to be coming at me. And oh darn, what do you have to do with that? What do you do with those comments? Well, it's a very subtle form of racism, that systemic racism that's riding through there. And the goal of that is assimilation. And this has been the goal since explorers first came to this land. There's something called the Christian doctrine of discovery. And the doctrine of discovery was an edict from the monarchs in Europe who said to the explorers, when you go out and you find land, and if you do not find a recognized monarch, and those are the words specific, recognized monarch, then consider the land terra nullius or terra nullius. The land is empty. and therefore they could take the land if they wanted to. And so, and that's a Christian doctrine. And that's the foundation of Canada and the United States. And unfortunately, there were shortly after that, because they found, of course, indigenous people here. And so then you can read back in history, many of the accounts, they talk about these debates that they would have with different popes, different religious leaders, and of course, the monarchy or leadership. They had debates as to whether or not indigenous people had a soul. Now, this so bothers me because as an indigenous person and having indigenous ancestry, this hurts me to hear this kind of talk. And when I first started reading some of this history and learning about this history, I was quite shocked. One of the reasons why they were having these debates is because if we had a soul, then they were obligated to send missionaries. But if we didn't have a soul, they could just exterminate us. And so that's the devastating part about all of this. And this is kind of the thing you don't read about in the history books. So they had a pope who decided, yes, they have a soul, and so therefore we have to send missionaries. So then came the next phase of the goal of assimilation and extermination, eventually extermination. That's always been the goal for Indigenous people in Canada, that the government has wanted to deal with the Indian problem. There are piles and piles of evidence of papers written between government officials back and forth who talked about this, who were trying to figure out ways to deal with and to get rid of Native people. And so this is not a new problem. Racism isn't new. It's just something that's kind of been with us all along. And it's not easy to talk about, because I talked, about my earlier experiences in church, and we kind of think, well, that maybe that's all gone now. Maybe that's not an issue anymore, because who would ask those questions in churches today? They're still being asked in churches today. And these are, I remember one pastor friend of mine who's Native, and he was speaking in a church in Canada, and after he spoke, somebody came up to him and said, "Wow, I didn't know Indians could be Christians." And another Native pastor friend of mine who was speaking in a church, like guest speaking, both of these situations, in a church in the US, and somebody came up to that person after and said, "Wow, I didn't know Indians could be intelligent." And so these misconceptions, there's so many. There's actually a book out of the United States, I think the University of Arizona, and it's a Native author who's talking about stereotypes about Native people, and they just go one by one through the stereotypes and break them down into how they're so not true. And we have to talk about these things. My experience of just these sort of like things that happen in church, they happen in society. In church, maybe we can sort of disguise them. We can sort of disguise them as, like I said, spirituality. But in the real world, when you're faced with police issues, police matters, it gets to be a little bit more dangerous. And we're all talking about this because of what happened with George Floyd in the United States, and what some are calling the riots, but what I would prefer to call the rebellion, the uprising, because I think every single one of us, and it sounds like your church, in all of the efforts and all the effort that you're putting into learning about racism in our own land here. We're sick of it. I think you guys are with me. We're just so done with this police violence, and I think we're asking better questions. I don't hear too often people saying, actually, you hear this. Maybe I'm not listening anymore. I have to block out some of these voices that are saying, if only they, people of color, or Black or Indigenous people of color, would just stop resisting arrest, or would just, stop committing crimes, then everything would be great. But if we look at the evidence, then we'll find the overwhelmingly it lines up on in color lines, and yeah. So George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. We know these names from the news, even though they're not even in our country. But we've been made aware of them because of people taking to the streets and protesting police violence. But there's other names that I need you to hear as well, because one of the news agencies reported that there were 8 Indigenous people murdered by police since April 8th. And that's Chantel Moore. She's Nuu-chah-nulth. She was one of the, shot 5 times in New Brunswick. Rodney Levy, who's Mi'kmaq. Aisha Hudson, Jason Collins, Kevin Andrews, all from the Winnipeg area. Abraham Natanine, who's from way up north. Regis Paquette in Toronto. And Everett Patrick, who is BC. I believe he's from Babine. And there are some news articles as well in, I should talk a little bit more about these names. These are loved ones. These are our daughters and sons brothers, sisters, dads, moms, grandchildren, and it hurts to know that that these things are happening. It hurts us to know that. And again, for the situation in the United States, where you have this huge uprising for Mr. George Floyd, and I'm that, like I said, we all looked at that and we were all like, "That's it, we're all done." And then we start to look within ourselves, within our own where we live, and then we realize, "Oh my goodness, this is happening here as well." And I've often said that there are two realities in Canada. There's one where for Indigenous people and how Indigenous people are treated, and then there's another one for Euro-Canadian background people. And if you're, a lot of these news stories that we share, you know, they're a part of us. I have heard these stories since I was a teenager. You know, there was a young man I went to school with from a nation or a village not far from mine, who was shot by police. And I remember being a 16-year-old and thinking, oh my goodness, like, how could that have happened? Like, and just, I was just shocked and stunned. This kid that I knew from school, from Prince George College, where a lot of the Native kids were bussed in and lived. It was shocking. So this is not abnormal for Indigenous people to hear these things. To hear that a friend or a relative has been murdered or died in police custody. This is not abnormal, but it is in non-Indigenous communities. It seems to be more prevalent that it's, you know, it's unheard of. Some of you guys would have never known anybody who's assaulted or lost their lives to police violence, because there are two realities in Canada. And some of those things going back to our roots with the doctrine of discovery, the Christian doctrine of discovery, where the systemic racism is, and I guess sometimes we don't recognize it because it's such a prevalent part of our lives. It's a normal part, and so when you start hearing stories from Indigenous people about the atrocities that happen, just like when you heard about the residential school, when you heard about that in 2008, when the apology was given, I'm sure you had the same reaction as everyone in Canada, and you were like, how could this have happened? This is so wrong. How come we never knew about it? And that is because someone was controlling the story. Someone was hiding the story, and it was the residential school survivors. Sorry, I lost my mic. It was the residential school survivors themselves who had to win a class action suit in order to get justice for our people. And so the same way you're learning about this now, and the tough part is that we want to just look away. We want to just say, you know, when we see these videos, we want to just say, oh, this is too traumatic. I can't watch anymore. But I ask you, I beg you, don't look away, because we can't. We have to face these situations so often. And we have a national inquiry into the murdered and missing Indigenous women. And I can tell you that if you asked a Native person, do you know missing or murdered Indigenous woman, they would probably say no. I don't only know just one. And that's definitely my case. I have to stop counting after one hand, and because I start to lose my mind a little bit with the pain and trauma of that. And so what does the Bible have to say about race? Well, when we see, one of my favorite stories is John 4, where we're talking about women and how vulnerable women can be. And the most vulnerable women in Canada are Indigenous women. And so whenever I see Jesus interacting with the woman, I'm grateful, because he seems to elevate their status. And in my reading, because he comes to in his day, of course, in ancient times, it's not like today. We can't read the Bible through the lens of our own culture. because back in those days, women didn't have any rights. Women were considered the same as property, and so women were never taught in public, and so there was just this very different way of being for women. And they were supposed to be in the house and taking care of stuff, having kids, creating heirs, and just taking care of the household business. But very much patriarchal society. And so when Jesus in John 4 walks up to the Samaritan woman and says, "Can you give me a drink?" He breaks down a gender barrier, and he breaks down a race barrier, because she herself says immediately after his question, she says, "Why are you talking to me, a Samaritan woman?" Those two things. And I didn't know this when I was starting to go to Bible school. I never thought about how that racism could be in the Bible, or that racism could be a thing. That the Bible would sort of, have to deal with. But there it is. And so the history of the Jews and the Samaritans is not a good one. There was a lot of racial disparity, at the very least. And if a Jew was walking on the street and a Samaritan was coming towards them, they would cross the street to avoid them, because they just didn't like their beliefs and so on, felt like they were really unclean. So Jesus breaking down this race barrier is kind of showing us some things that we can do. But the first thing that Jesus does, and I try to tell people who are interested in working with Indigenous people, I always say, we don't want you to always sort of come at us with, "How can I help? How can I help you?" Because it insinuates that we are sort of the poor, needy ones, and please help us, and the patronizing, whatever. We don't want that. And Jesus didn't do that either. He said, "Can you give me a glass of water, or a cup of water?" I guess they didn't have glass then, but I should know that from the Holy Grail. That Indiana Jones show. Anyway, so Jesus asks for help. Jesus is the one who is putting himself in the place of need and walking alongside a person. And then that question opens up this whole conversation of the things of spirit, the things of God. And that woman goes on to become the first evangelist noted in the New Testament. And that story is encouraging to me, that Jesus would go and walk in such a humble way. And one of the things also that we find the Creator doing is not being afraid to be humble, not being afraid to become a learner, not being afraid to become a dependent. And those things, those words might sound shocking, but how did the Creator of the universe, how did the God, this ancient being, the one with no beginning and no end, how did this one become known to humankind? Well, through the birth of Jesus, and coming to this world as a newborn baby, the picture, the ultimate picture of dependence, the ultimate picture of a learner, and I think that ability, the ability to do that, to empty oneself and to begin again, to begin anew with humility, to learn things, that might be what it might take for Canada to understand Indigenous issues and racism in Canada, and to begin to uproot some of these old systems that we find here, in order that we can make things equal. And that's a key word, when we talk about equal rights. We're not talking about more. We're not talking about, we want it all. We're just talking about all Indigenous people want is those promises to be kept, the ancient treaties to be kept. And there's Canadians, there's new Canadians coming here New immigrants come into Canada all the time, and the government has this ceremony and has this teaching that they give, but I'm not sure that they say to new immigrants, I'm not sure that part of the test that they do says, did you know that you are entering into a treaty relationship with Indigenous peoples? I'm not sure that that's on there. And so it's an afterthought. And again, it's who is writing this story, who is telling this story. So I'd like to encourage you to read some Indigenous authors. There's lots of really good Christian books written by Christian authors. My late friend, my dear friend, the late Dr. Richard Twist, wrote a couple of really good books. You can Google him. The book I already mentioned, Unsettling Truths, wonderful book, and lots of others. When you Google search those, other ones will come up. So I encourage you again to listen to Indigenous people. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to learn all of these new things, and it's a journey, but it's one of unraveling some of the untruths and beginning anew to walk alongside. And Indigenous people, like I said, I think that Canada needs the help of Indigenous people. We have so much beauty. We have so many beautiful things to share, so much beautiful wisdom to share with the rest of Canada. And it's about time that started happening. So thank you for inviting me to speak. This is a big step, I believe, in your journey towards reconciliation. And so thank you again, and I look forward to talking to you again, I hope. All the best.
Cheryl, thank you for sharing so honestly with us. I imagine continuing to share those experiences is as difficult for you as it is important for us. Today, we have been challenged to lean in, to listen and learn, to allow our perspectives to be widened and our hearts to be open to the kind of change that needs to happen in us in order to become the kind of change we need to see in this world. I also want to say thank you to Janessa, Darcy, and Derek for sharing the truth of their experiences with us today and for guiding and stretching us through some powerful moments of reflection. We've actually created some intentional resources for you to continue to journey in that way on your own this week. Cheryl mentioned John chapter 4, and we've got a reflection for you to dig deeper into that story. Plus the spiritual practice Janessa invited us into, the moments of silence Derek encouraged, and a few other ideas for how we can take what we've begun to learn today and grow it deeper through the daily walk of our lives. You can access those by clicking the Putting It Into Practice button below, or you can find them on the activities page of our spiritual practices page. I also want to let you know that as a church family, we will be leaning into this listening and learning journey heavily over the next 2 weeks as we continue our It Takes a Village series. Genuinely desiring to be shaped by the voices of our Black, Indigenous, and people of color brothers and sisters. We challenge you to make it a top priority to fully engage with this entire series, and with an open heart and an open mind. And finally, we want to respond right now with a song that invites God to do the deep and difficult work in each of us that can allow Him to bring about the kind of change that we're talking about. We need a new heart, new attitudes, new approaches, and a whole new system in order to bring true healing to the brokenness of our world, particularly as it relates to systemic racism. And so as we sing this song, let's invite God to break in us what needs to be broken, so that together we can break new ground in our faith, in our relationships, and in our world. So let's sing.
In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil, I now surrender. making new ground. So I yield to you into your careful hand. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. Make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, and all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. So make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, and all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom. Kingdom is here. Lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. Where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom. Kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, and all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
Well, we're really glad that you fully engaged in today's experience together with us. We hope that it's been super helpful for you. I know it has been for us as a community together. And just want to highlight the next 2 weeks of our It Takes a Village series, and hope that you'll not only join in with us again, but that you'll share the invitation with friends or family that you know who could also benefit from experiencing this together along with us. As we wrap up, let's remember that for anyone who needs prayer, to access our prayer wall on our webpage, southridgechurch.ca/prayer, offer a prayer or offer prayer on behalf of those who posted prayer requests there. As well, if there are practical needs that we can help meet in your life or that you'd like to help meet in other people's lives, remember to go to our COVID-19 support page and you'll find the Need Help, Give Help page there, where you can submit either your need or your capacity to meet that need, so that we can be a no need among us community. We're going to shift gears and now go to our virtual lobby. And so below the video player, we hope that you'll click or cut and paste the link and join us in on that Zoom conversation together. 15, 20 minutes of just enjoying the gift that God's given us in each other as we mix and mingle as a church family. So we hope to see you there. And if not, we hope to see you next week as we continue on this journey as a church family together. Take care, everyone.